The rain. It sounds different up here, doesn't it? Not a harsh assault, but a persistent whisper against the frosted glass, a steady companion to the night's deepening chill, reminding you how far you've journeyed from whatever hearth you left behind. Step closer then, you weary souls, for the Moonlit Tavern's inviting glow promises a profound refuge from such damp embrace, the kind of warmth that slowly seeps into your very bones, chasing away the stubborn memory of the biting air and the long-shadowed miles. Observe how the lantern light, a soft honeyed gold, dances on the rough-hewn beams above, casting long, friendly shadows that stretch and sway like old familiar friends by the hearth's constant flicker, while the good, clean scent of pine resin and seasoned oak hangs heavy in the air, a deep, grounding comfort against the still damp cloaks you've shed by the door. You have braved the winding, often treacherous paths, perhaps even skirted the silent, snow-laden edges of those ancient, whispering forests where the wind tells its own sagas. And now, at long last, there is a space here, a true sanctuary, where the clamor of the world outside can truly fade for a precious while. Forget the relentless wind's mournful song, the unsettling rustle of unseen things in the deep, unyielding woods. Here, only the soothing crackle of the fire and the low, contented murmur of quiet conversation will gently fill your ears, a balm to travel-worn spirits. We gather in this circle of warmth not for warnings or tales designed to conjure chilling frights, but rather for the quiet wonder that only old stories can bring. Narratives woven intricately into the very fabric of this vast, enigmatic land. Echoes of whispers carried on the wind through the grand northern wilderness. Tales that sometimes, almost imperceptibly, remind us of the quiet, enduring strength that resides within each of us, and the profound, humbling wisdom held in simply learning to endure. These are the narratives of this place, passed down through countless seasons, shaped by the relentless bite of winter's winds and the silent, watchful gaze of the ageless trees. Stories not of tangible monsters lurking in every shadow, but of the landscape's deep, often misunderstood heart, and of human nature's delicate, intricate balance when faced with the grand, indifferent scale of the wild. Moonlit Tavern welcomes weary travelers. There is always a chair by the hearth. Tonight, as the last embers settle into their patient glow, we'll draw back the curtain on one such enduring whisper, a gentle, reflective telling, offered not to instill fear, but to deepen your understanding of these stark and beautiful territories. A narrative whose lessons are as timeless as the pines, speaking less of outward menace and more of the subtle, internal landscapes we all navigate. The silence outside, beyond these thick wooden walls and the comforting glow of our lamps, often speaks a deeper tongue than any human voice, especially when the northern frost has settled thick and heavy over the land, muffling the world in a blanket of white that stretches endlessly beneath the watchful stars, a canvas of hushed majesty and profound stillness. It is in these long, stark winters, when the very air bites with an ancient primordial cold that seems to seep into the bones of the earth itself, touching everything with its icy breath, that the old stories truly come alive, not merely as idle chatter, but as vivid, living echoes of ancestral wisdom. These are whispers carried on the biting wind, tales told low around the dying embers of a hearth fire, passed from one generation to the next like a precious vital warmth, a thread connecting past to present in the face of the encroaching darkness. For those who have always called these vast, snow-laden forests home, the hardy peoples whose lives are intricately woven with the rhythms of this formidable wilderness, the land itself is a living scroll. Each tower and pine, each frozen river, each crusted drift, inscribed with narratives as old as the oldest gnarled trees. These are narratives about the unseen spirits that walk among us, about the delicate balance that must be kept between humanity and the wild, and about the dire consequences that ripple outward when that sacred equilibrium is violently disrupted by a hunger that transcends mere mortal need, a craving so profound, so consuming, that it can twist the very essence of a soul. Such tales are not simply fanciful yarns spun to ward off the chill or entertain on a long evening. They are the profound echoes of an understanding deeply etched into the collective memory of peoples like the various Algonquian nations, whose rich histories and vibrant cultures are inextricably intertwined with the very fabric of these northern woods and their long, demanding, often brutal seasons. From time immemorial, these astute observers of nature have known that the forest, though at times bounteous, can also be a stark, unforgiving realm, a teacher demanding respect and constant vigilance, particularly when resources dwindle to nothing and the specter of starvation looms large, casting its long, gaunt shadow over communities. It is during these cruelly lean times when desperate cravings might awaken something far more terrifying than a gnawing stomach, something that subtly, insidiously shifts from the human into the monstrous, that the deepest fears and most primal warnings take root. This profound awareness of the land's stark realities, the delicate line between survival and transgression, has profoundly shaped their intricate lore, given rise to cautionary tales and urgent warnings woven into the very fabric of their cultural tapestry. These stories are meant to guide, to protect, and to define the sacred boundaries of what it truly means to be human in the face of nature's most extreme and humbling challenges. Tales that speak of a hunger so profound, so alien, that it could utterly transform not just a body, but the very spirit of an individual, leaving behind only an echoing, icy void. Across those vast, hushed lands of the northern peoples, stretched beneath the unblinking, crystalline gaze of winter's moon, and shrouded in a silence so profound it seems to press in on the very soul, whispers often carry of a chilling presence, a spirit born not merely of ghost or shadow, but from the deep, desperate hunger that gnaws at the heart of the long, bitter, cold season. Among the various Algonquian-speaking nations, whose lives are woven as intricately with the snow-laden forests as the patterns on their winter cloaks, this entity is known by a name whispered with a certain profound reverence and dread, a word that evokes the very essence of isolation and a terrifying, unquenchable craving. It is said that this spirit, sometimes described as gaunt and skeletal, with eyes like glowing coals and a heart of ice, embodies the ravenous, all-consuming hunger that can take root in the human soul during those cruelly protracted, merciless winters, when the world outside turns stark white and empty, and every choice becomes a terrible, knife-edge decision between survival and something far, far worse. These ancient tales, passed down through generations around the flicker of crackling fires while the bleak wind howls outside, serve as profound, urgent warnings against the perils of insatiable greed, against taking more than one needs, against consuming without thought for tomorrow, and particularly against the ultimate taboo, the unthinkable act of turning upon one's own kind in the clutches of starvation. A transgression so absolute it twists the very essence of the soul, corrupting it beyond recognition. Ethnographers and folklorists studying the rich traditions of these indigenous cultures have long noted how such narratives profoundly underscore the critical importance of communal sharing and self-restraint, virtues absolutely essential for survival in environments where resources can dwindle to nothing in a heartbeat, and where the delicate balance between humanity and the formidable wilderness must be meticulously maintained. For many, this terrifying spirit is more than just a campfire story. It is the very personification of a dark transformation, a psychological shadow made manifest by the extreme privation and crushing isolation of the frozen wilderness, a madness that can possess the weakened mind, distorting perception and driving individuals to unspeakable acts. A chilling echo of humanity's deepest, most primal fears in the face of nature's unyielding power, reminding all who listen that true monsters often lurk not in the shadows, but within the hungry heart itself. Long before the first glimmers of dawn touched these deep forests, even before the eldest among us saw their first winter, the wise ones, the keepers of memory and the tellers of truth, would gather their people close, not beneath the harsh, unyielding glare of a winter sun, but by the flickering, comforting light of a communal hearth. Their purpose was not to weave tales of terror simply to make young hearts pound faster against cold nights, but rather to impart a profound, life-sustaining wisdom, lessons etched into the very soul of the land and honed by countless seasons of hardship and survival. It was in these intimate, smoke-scented gatherings that they first spoke of a chilling, formidable entity, a being that haunted the periphery of human understanding and served as a stark, unforgettable reminder of the delicate balance between sustenance and ruin. They painted a vivid, unsettling picture of a creature gaunt and perpetually famished, its form skeletal, its eyes burning with an unnatural, unquenchable craving that no amount of consumption could ever satisfy. This insatiable being, they taught, was not merely a phantom of the ice-bound woods. It was a potent, living metaphor for the profound perils of unchecked greed, of a self-serving nature that devours everything in its path, leaving only desolation and emptiness in its wake. This relentless hunger, they warned, would twist a person from within, corrupting their spirit and transforming them into something monstrous, something devoid of compassion and community. Indeed, across the vast tapestry of Algonquian languages, this very concept, this deeply unsettling fusion of monstrous hunger and spiritual corruption, is embodied in the name itself, Wendigo or Wheatigo. These ancient words, resonant with the accumulated wisdom of countless generations, carry within them the profound weight of meaning, signifying not merely a monster in the simplistic sense, but a truly terrifying evil spirit, a malevolent force born of desperate times and desperate choices. It is a name that whispers of a terrible transformation, a cautionary echo from the very roots of their existence, serving as a timeless admonition to remain ever vigilant, to honor the sacred bonds of sharing and reciprocity, and to never, ever succumb to the ravenous, unholy appetite, especially when the wilderness itself demands that all beings exist in careful, respectful harmony. When the whispers turn to hushed, knowing tones, the elders often describe the physical manifestation of this terrible spirit, a figure set to stalk the most desolate, snow-choked corners of the northern woods, often in the deepest, most unforgiving stretches of winter. Imagine, if you will, a towering form that moves with an eerie, disjointed grace upon two impossibly long legs, its movements perhaps mirroring the unsettling sway of skeletal trees in a biting gale. a creature so incredibly tall and thin that its very presence seems to stretch the fabric of the frigid air around it. Its skin, they say, is not flesh in the way we understand it, but rather a taut, greenish-gray parchment pulled so tightly over its prominent bones that every knob and ridge of its skeletal frame is sharply defined, as if etched by the harsh hand of perpetual starvation. Some tales even speak of its eyes, deep-set and burning with an unnatural light, and its lips, or what remains of them, being gnawed away, revealing rows of sharp, inhuman teeth. But perhaps the most unsettling detail, the one that chills the blood even within the warmth of this tavern, is the heart that beats within its hollow chest, or rather, the heart that doesn't beat in any living sense. For the Wendigo, it is said, possesses a heart of pure, unforgiving ice, a core of absolute cold that renders it immune to the frost, yet forever bound by its chilling essence. The presence of this ghastly entity, far from being just a fleeting shadow, often announces itself with a profound, almost palpable shift in the very atmosphere. An unnatural cold descends, a biting chill that seems to seep into the marrow of your bones, regardless of how many layers you wear, far colder than even the most brutal northern gale. This is not merely the chill of winter, but an alien cold, a profound absence of warmth, of life itself. And accompanying this pervasive, bone-deep cold is a faint yet unmistakably unsettling scent carried on the frigid air. A subtle, sickly sweet aroma, a pervasive whiff of decay and ancient rot, the haunting, lingering perfume of death that clings to the snow and the pines long after the creature has passed, a silent testament to its horrifying, unnatural hunger. These are the signs the old ones warn, by which you may know its approach, the sensory echoes of a profound and terrifying evil that truly belongs to the deepest, most desolate heart of winter. The elders, in their profound wisdom, always emphasized the sacred importance of community, of keeping close to the warmth of shared hearths and shared burdens, especially when the deep winter held the land in its unforgiven grip. For those who, by ill fortune or by their own choices, found themselves straying far from the comfort and embrace of their kin, venturing deep into the isolated, snow-choked wilderness, a solemn, chilling caution was always issued. It was whispered that the Wendigo, with its icy heart and ceaseless gnawing hunger, possessed a terrible, almost predatory intuition for such solitary souls, for those who, through hardship or hubris, had allowed themselves to become vulnerable. In those desperate, silent stretches of extreme scarcity, when the hunting snares lay empty, when the last stores of pemmican dwindled to crumbs, and the cold seemed to suck the very hope from a person's spirit, the Wendigo was said to draw near, a presence felt rather than seen, a subtle shift in the air, a faint, unsettling echo in the vast, still silence. It would not appear with a roar or a sudden, terrifying assault, but rather with an insidious, seductive whisper, a promise that resonated deep within the starved mind, a siren song of easy relief from the torment of hunger, a way out of the crushing despair. This insidious voice, barely a murmur on the wind, would subtly begin to twist their thoughts, to gnaw at the edges of their reason, slowly but surely turning their minds towards forbidden acts, towards choices so profoundly transgressive, so utterly taboo, that they would sever all ties not just to their community, but to their very humanity. It was a psychological torment, a battle waged not with claws and teeth, but within the very sanctuary of the mind, a relentless erosion of moral boundaries. The tale says that once that insidious seed of cannibalistic hunger took root, once the unthinkable became merely a desperate option, the transformation would begin, slowly at first, then with an accelerated chill certainty, as the victim's own spirit began to mirror the gaunt, ravenous form of the monster that had claimed them. Thus, the warnings were not just about a creature of ice and bone, but about the fragile boundary within the human heart itself, a boundary that, once breached in the face of despair and isolation, might never, ever be restored. Among the deep wisdom of the Algonquian peoples, whose lives have always been intimately bound to the rhythms and challenges of the northern forests, the chilling presence of the Wendigo is often understood not merely as a random, malicious entity that simply emerges from the snows, but rather as a profound and terrible consequence, a haunting manifestation of deep spiritual and communal imbalance. It is frequently portrayed as the direct result of a profound disrespect for the delicate, sacred natural balance, a disregard for the intricate web of life that sustains all beings within this formidable wilderness. The elders teach that when humanity, in its desperation or its arrogance, takes more than it needs, when it fails to honor the intricate dance of reciprocity between hunter and hunted, between giver and receiver, a profound disequilibrium sets in. This imbalance, they say, can fester and grow, eventually giving rise to the monstrous. Furthermore, the tales whisper that the Wendigo is also a stark, terrifying manifestation of extreme, prolonged starvation itself, a condition so brutal, so absolute, that it can drive a human being beyond the boundaries of reason and into the realm of the unspeakable. In this telling, it is as if the very agony of the empty stomach, the gnawing pain of a body utterly devoid of nourishment, can somehow coalesce into a sentient, predatory force. The power of this chilling spirit, they warn, grows most potently and insidiously in those dire moments when individual human needs, particularly the desperate urge to survive at any cost, tragically overcome the foundational shared values and proper conduct of the community. When the sacred principles of generosity, mutual support, and profound respect for all life are abandoned in favor of selfish acquisition or isolated survival, the door swings open to something truly monstrous. It is then, in that chasm between communal obligation and desperate individual hunger, that the Wendigo truly thrives, not just as a creature of the forest, but as a chilling echo of humanity's deepest moral failures, a ghostly reminder that the greatest horrors often begin with a single, selfish choice made in the crucible of extreme need. It is a common misunderstanding among those who do not truly know the ways of the deep woods or the intricate lore of the Algonquian peoples, that the ravenous hunger of the Wendigo is solely a hunger of the belly, a simple, animalistic craving for flesh brought on by the crushing despair of starvation. Yet the old stories, those passed down through generations by the flickering firelight, teach a far more nuanced and chilling truth, that the truly insidious nature of this spirit extends beyond mere physical deprivation, reaching into the very core of the human spirit. For it is not only the gnawing emptiness of the stomach, the desperate pangs of a body starved of sustenance, that can draw the malevolent attention of the Wendigo. More profoundly, more perilously, it is the hunger of the heart itself, an insatiable, corrosive desire for more than one truly needs, an avaricious yearning that breeds not contentment but an ever-deepening emptiness. a profound disregard for the well-being and shared resources of others that truly invites its chilling influence. When a person allows their spirit to become consumed by such self-serving desires, when the communal values of sharing, generosity, and mutual respect begin to erode under the weight of personal greed, the spiritual pathway opens, inviting the dark whispers of the Wendigo. This entity, they say, does not simply manifest from the harshness of the winter. It is drawn to, and indeed feeds upon, the moral corruption that blooms in the human soul when compassion is withered by selfishness. What begins as a subtle shift in perspective, a quiet rationalization of taking a little more, of looking out only for oneself, can, under the Wendigo's insidious sway, slowly and irrevocably twist even the most well-intentioned person. Good intentions, born of a desire to protect one's own or to secure a comfortable future, can become distorted, transformed into an all-consuming obsession that blinds one to the suffering of others, turning a once kind heart into something cold and unyielding, much like the very essence of the spirit itself. It is a slow spiritual poison, a relentless erosion of empathy, until the hunger for more becomes an end in itself, a bottomless pit that no amount of acquisition can ever truly fill, leaving a soul utterly consumed by its own insatiable emptiness, a tragic reflection of the gaunt, perpetually craving monster it has allowed to claim it. Let us turn now to a tale often recounted when the snow drifts high against the tavern windows, a chilling survival story that echoes the deepest fears of those who live at the very edge of the wild, the frost-kissed hunter's tale. Imagine, if you will, a seasoned tracker, a man known for his keen eye and steady hand, who ventured perhaps a day or two too far from the comforting smoke of his village hearth. He was in pursuit of winter game, providing for his family as all good hunters must, when, without warning, the skies turned an ominous bruised gray, and the heavens unleashed a blizzard of such ferocity that it seemed the very world was being scoured clean. What was meant to be a swift excursion stretched into something far more perilous as the snow fell relentlessly, burying familiar landmarks under a featureless, pristine white expanse, and the biting wind howled like 1,000 hungry wolves. His carefully packed provisions, intended for a few days' trek, began to dwindle with alarming speed, each morsel now chewed slowly, carefully, as if to make it last longer, to draw out its scant warmth. Days bled into weeks, each one a relentless test of endurance against the elements, against the gnawing hunger that began to take root in his belly, and, most insidiously, against the profound, crushing isolation. The once familiar forest, which had always been a source of sustenance and comfort, now seemed to transform, its towering pines becoming gaunt, silent sentinels, watching, waiting. Their branches, heavy with snow, appeared like skeletal arms, reaching, or perhaps recoiling. The profound, almost deafening silence of the snow-laden woods, usually a source of peace, became a heavy, suffocating burden, pressing in on his mind, amplifying every creak of the ice, every rustle of dry leaves beneath the drifts. In that oppressive quiet, with the ceaseless roar of the wind in his ears and the constant ache in his stomach, the hunter found his thoughts turning to dark, desperate places, his resolve slowly chipping away like ice from a frozen stream. It was then, in that crucible of cold, hunger, and utter solitude, that the true test of his spirit began. For the wilderness, in its most brutal form, was about to offer him a choice that would echo the ancient warnings of the Wendigo, a choice between life and a far more terrible transformation. In the hunter's deepening solitude, as the relentless, unforgiving blizzard raged outside his makeshift shelter, burying the world under layers of pristine, yet utterly indifferent white, the bitter cold slowly, insidiously transformed from a mere external adversary into a chilling, constant companion, a presence that seeped into his very bones and settled deep within his spirit. Every breath he took felt like inhaling needles of ice, and the gnawing hunger, initially a sharp, insistent physical ache in his belly, slowly but surely morphed into an incessant, obsessive thought, a singular, all-consuming focus that began to overshadow all other sensations, all other memories. His mind, once clear and sharp from years of wilderness living, grew sluggish, hazy, as the insidious tendrils of hypothermia and starvation began to tighten their grip, blurring the lines between reality and the desperate illusions of a famished brain. He desperately tried to grasp the fragile threads of memory, the teachings of his elders, the comforting, rhythmic melodies of his people's hunting songs, the sacred stories of their traditions that spoke of resilience and the profound respect owed to the land and to each other. He pictured the warm glow of the communal hearth, the faces of his family, the shared laughter that once banished the cold from his heart. Yet, in that vast, featureless expanse of white, beneath an indifferent iron-gray sky, surrounded by the oppressive, suffocating silence of the snow-laden wilderness, even these precious anchors began to fray, to recede, to fade like whispers on the wind against the deafening roar of the storm and the crushing silence that followed. The wisdom, the strength, the very essence of his identity, nurtured by years within a vibrant, interconnected community, seemed to dissolve, leaving him exposed and vulnerable to the most primal, terrifying whispers of the frozen woods. It was in this profound state of physical and mental erosion where the boundary between self and the stark, indifferent world began to blur that the hunter faced the true burden of his isolation, a terrifying emptiness that threatened to consume not just his body, but the very soul he had once held sacred, leaving him ripe for the dark whispers of an ancient, hungry spirit. It was then, as the hunter's body wasted away and his mind grew thin and brittle from the unrelenting cold and the crushing, all-consuming hunger, that the true wilderness began to assert its most terrifying, insidious influence, not as an external force of nature, but as a chilling presence that seeped into the very chambers of his exhausted, desperate thoughts. He began to see things, visions that flickered at the extreme edges of his sight, elusive and unsettling, yet utterly compelling. These were not mere shadows cast by the dying fire or tricks of the snowlight, but vivid, almost corporeal apparitions, figures that danced just beyond his direct gaze, constantly retreating and reappearing. Most prominent, most unsettling among these spectral guests was a towering, gaunt figure, impossibly thin, its form almost skeletal, a living echo of starvation itself. This phantom, the tales whisper, was always there, just beyond reach, a peripheral nightmare that intensified with each passing moment of deprivation. Its eyes, the hunter perceived in his fading awareness, were not human eyes, but rather pits of glowing, ancient malevolence, burning with an unholy, consuming hunger that mirrored and amplified the terrible gnawing in his own belly. They seemed to hold the cold, unforgiving light of the deepest winter, an alien intelligence that promised both dread and a twisted form of understanding. And this figure, this chilling embodiment of the Wendigo, did not simply lurk. It beckoned, its long, emaciated arm, or what seemed like an arm, making subtle, alluring gestures. It seemed to whisper promises, not in words that could be clearly heard, but in insidious, persuasive thoughts that blossomed in his mind like frost flowers, thoughts of things that offered a twisted, forbidden form of sustenance, things that would quell the unbearable ache, satisfy the ravenous craving, but at an unspeakable, irreversible cost. The vision, so vivid and persistent, began to erode the last vestiges of his resistance, blurring the sacred boundaries between life and death, between human and monster, urging him towards a choice that would define his fate in the most horrifying, irreversible way. For the forest, in its cruelest teaching, was revealing the true nature of its most ancient, hungry spirit. Such are the chilling visions, the insidious whispers that, the tales say, begin to cloud the mind of a hunter lost to the unforgiving embrace of a northern winter, when the body screams for warmth and the belly for sustenance, and the spirit feels utterly adrift in a vast, indifferent white world. But let us pause for a moment. Let these grim images recede from the mind's eye as the flickering lamplight plays upon the polished wood of our tables, and the comforting scent of wood smoke fills this cozy tavern. Allow me to offer another cup to those whose mugs have grown light, for a storyteller's voice, much like a fire, thrives on being rekindled, and there is more to this ancient telling than mere surface dread. It is at moments like these, when the journey of the story turns from simple curiosity to a closer, more intimate understanding, that the deeper details of these legends truly resonate, drawing us inward towards the very heart of what they reveal about the human spirit. And indeed, what these profound stories echo, beyond the supernatural, touches upon a curious and unsettling phenomenon that scholars and ethnographers have documented across these very northern lands. They speak of what has, over time, been termed Wendigo psychosis, a unique and deeply culturally rooted syndrome distinct to certain Algonquian communities that manifests as an intense, almost overwhelming craving for human flesh, often accompanied by delusions and a profound fear of actually turning into the monstrous Wendigo itself. This is not simply a folktale's invention, but a recognized, albeit rare, psychological condition that emerges from the crucible of extreme deprivation, profound isolation, and the deep-seated cultural anxieties surrounding the ultimate taboo of cannibalism. Imagine the sheer terror, the absolute horror of feeling your own mind, your own body, slowly twisting under the relentless pressure of starvation, knowing that the very act that might offer temporary survival would, in the eyes of your people and your own spirit, transform you into the very monster you fear most, a gaunt, ice-hearted devourer. This is not simply a folktale's invention, but a recognized, albeit rare, psychological condition that emerges from the crucible of extreme deprivation, profound isolation, and the deep-seated cultural anxieties surrounding the ultimate taboo of cannibalism. Imagine the sheer terror, the absolute horror of feeling your own mind, your own body, slowly twisting under the relentless pressure of starvation, knowing that the very act that might offer temporary survival would, in the eyes of your people and your own spirit, transform you into the very monster you fear most, a gaunt, ice-hearted devourer. It is a terrifying testament to the power of belief, of communal values, and of the profound psychological impact of living at the edge of survival in one of the world's most demanding environments, underscoring how deeply these legends are woven into the very psychological fabric of life in the northern frost. So, as the fire crackles and our cups are refilled, we understand that these tales are not just about a lurking beast, but about the beast that can awaken within us, a stark reflection of the choices we make when pushed to our uttermost limits. Leave a note in the ledger and drop by when the lanterns glow again, for the hunter's journey through the snows continues, and with it the terrifying question of his ultimate fate. The hunter, already pushed to the brink by the ceaseless cold and the gnawing void in his belly, found himself embroiled in a battle far more terrifying than any physical struggle with a wild beast, a battle waged within the very sanctuary of his own mind. The insidious thoughts, born of extreme privation and the creeping despair of isolation, coiled and struck like venomous serpents, whispering promises of relief, of sustenance, but always with an unspoken, horrifying cost. He fought them with every fiber of his being, clinging desperately to the fading embers of his humanity. For this seasoned man of the woods, steeped in the ancient lore of his people, knew these whispers intimately. He recognized them with a cold dread that pierced deeper than any frost, as the insidious influence of the Wendigo itself. The chilling stories told around countless hearth fires throughout his life, tales of those who had succumbed, of the dreadful transformation from human to monster, now played out not merely as cautionary narratives, but as a horrifying living prophecy within his own skull. He was being tempted relentlessly to betray the very essence of his being, to violate the most sacred tenets of his culture, to turn from the path of kinship and respect for life, all for the primal, desperate urge to survive, to prolong a fleeting existence in this merciless white wilderness. The hunger was a physical torment, yes, but the true agony lay in the moral dilemma, the spiritual test of his very soul. Each passing hour was a crucible, forging or breaking his resolve, as the gaunt, shimmering figure, a constant presence at the periphery of his vision, continued its silent, compelling beckoning, its glowing eyes promising an end to his suffering, but an end that would forever extinguish the light within him. He wrestled with the terrible truth that the monster was not just outside in the snow-laden pines, but was attempting to take root within, planting seeds of unthinkable craving that threatened to blossom into utter, irreversible horror. It was a fight for his soul, a desperate, lonely stand against the ultimate corruption. Leave a note in the ledger and drop by when the lanterns glow again, for the hunter's fate still hangs in the balance, a harrowing testament to the choices made at the edge of human endurance. As the days stretched into a relentless eternity, each one bleeding into the next with the monotonous, crushing weight of snow and silence, the hunter's physical form grew undeniably weaker. His once robust frame now gaunt and hollow, a mere skeletal suggestion of the strong man he had been. The bitter, gnawing cold of the wilderness, which had long been his adversary, now seemed to find purchase not just on his skin, but deep within his very marrow, infiltrating his blood, chilling his thoughts, and threatening to freeze the very wellspring of his spirit. Yet, amidst this profound and devastating physical decline, a spark, however dim and fragile, of his innate resolve continued to flicker, a stubborn, defiant ember against the encroaching darkness. It was a resolve that felt less like an unyielding fortress, but more like a fragile, translucent shield, barely holding back the relentless, insidious pressure of the Wendigo's whispered temptations and its constant, chilling presence that clawed at the edges of his sanity. Each new dawn, if such a term could even be applied to the anemic light filtering through the perpetually overcast skies, brought with it not hope, but another battle, another desperate stand against the growing, pervasive cold that now felt as if it were invading not just his physical being, but his very soul, threatening to transform him from a man of flesh and blood into something else entirely, something cold, something empty, something monstrous. His mind, though fogged by hunger and fatigue, clung precariously to the memories of his people, to the warmth of their hearths, to the sacred laws and traditions that forbade the very acts the spirit was urging him towards, using these fragile anchors as a desperate bulwark against the rising tide of internal madness. He knew with a certainty that chilled him even more than the Arctic winds, that to succumb was to lose more than just his life. It was to forfeit his very essence, to become an echo of the monster that stalked the snow-choked pines, forever hungry, forever alone. This internal struggle, a harrowing dance on the precipice of absolute despair, was the true crucible of his journey, a test of his spirit against the most primal, terrifying aspects of the northern wilderness and the ancient, hungry entities that were said to embody its cruelest lessons. So, as the fire within our own hearth crackles merrily, reflecting in the depths of your refilled cups, let us reflect on this profound internal war. Leave a note in the ledger and drop by when the lanterns glow again, for the hunter's story continues, and with it, the ultimate question of whether the fragile shield of his humanity could endure against such an overwhelming, soul-deep cold. Just as the last vestiges of the hunter's resolve seemed poised to shatter, as the profound, suffocating despair threatened to consume him whole, swallowing the final flickers of his humanity amidst the vast, indifferent white, something miraculous, something so utterly unexpected yet profoundly real, broke through the chilling, hallucinatory spell of his agonizing isolation. It might have been a distant plume of smoke, a faint, ethereal wisp rising against the stark, frozen sky, carrying with it the undeniable, hopeful scent of a human hearth. Or perhaps it was the faint, muffled sound of a dog's bark, a sound so utterly familiar, so deeply embedded in the comforts of village life that it pierced through the cacophony of his internal struggle like a shard of pure light. Whatever it was, this slender thread of connection, this subtle whisper of the living world, acted as a powerful counterspell, a potent antidote to the insidious poison of the Wendigo's influence. In that precise, critical moment, the gaunt, skeletal visions that had tormented him for days, the glowing, hungry eyes that had haunted his peripheral sight, began to recede, dissolving like mist before the rising sun. The chilling whispers that had promised twisted forms of sustenance and urged him toward unthinkable acts now faded, their malevolent power weakened by the undeniable, tangible presence of distant humanity. It was as if the very essence of community, however far off, created a barrier, a shield that repelled the spirit of isolation and consumption. The crushing weight of the cold seemed to lessen its grip. The gnawing hunger, though still present, no longer held the same absolute, all-consuming dominance over his thoughts. He found within himself a newfound desperate strength, a primal surge of will to move towards that faint smoke, to follow that distant sound, to cling to this fragile glimmer of hope as if it were the last star in a freezing, endless night. He began to move, each step an agony, but each step also a defiant act of reclamation, a stubborn refusal to be utterly consumed. Though he eventually found his way back, rescued by searchers who had braved the blizzard, the ordeal left an indelible mark. The memories of the Wendigo's insidious temptations and the terrifying visions of his near transformation would linger always, not as fresh wounds, but as deep, unyielding frostbite scars upon his soul, a constant chilling reminder of the delicate boundary between human and monster, and the profound, enduring power of the northern forest's most ancient, hungry spirit. In the slow, arduous process of reclaiming his steps from the snow-choked wilderness, guided by the steadfast hands of his searching kin, the hunter eventually emerged from the vast, indifferent white, a shadow of his former self, gaunt and visibly changed by the profound crucible of his ordeal, yet by some miracle of spirit and sheer will, fundamentally whole. His eyes, though still haunted by the echoing glimmers of the terrible visions, held a new, deeper understanding, a quiet knowing of the darkness that lurks not just in the deepest, most desolate corners of the forest, but also in the most vulnerable recesses of the human heart when pushed to its absolute breaking point. He returned to the comforting, familiar warmth of his village hearth, to the reassuring presence of his people. But the man who had left was not entirely the same as the one who came back. His experience became, for those who truly understood, a solemn, quiet testament to the astonishing, often underestimated resilience of the human spirit, its profound capacity to endure unimaginable suffering, to resist the most insidious temptations, and to cling to the fragile thread of humanity even when all hope seems to have abandoned it. Yet it was also a chilling, enduring reminder of the insidious, almost seductive nature of the Wendigo's lure, a testament to how close he had come to the precipice of irreversible transformation. The whispers of that ancient, hungry spirit, though quelled by the return to community and the return of sustenance, left an indelible mark, a frostbite scar upon his very soul that would never truly fade. He would carry with him, always, the ghostly scent of decay, the memory of that unnatural cold, and the terrifying knowledge of the gaunt figure that had beckoned him from the snowdrifts, urging him toward a forbidden, unspeakable relief. His was a silent, living warning, a story etched not in words alone, but in the very lines etched upon his face, a profound example of the deep wisdom held in the Algonquian tales, that true monsters often arise not from mere malice, but from the brutal collision of desperation, isolation, and an all-consuming hunger that threatens to extinguish the last flickering spark of human connection. It was a harrowing, hard-won lesson, a testament to the fact that, while the physical body might heal, some journeys leave wounds that delve far deeper than flesh and bone, forever altering the landscape of the soul, a quiet echo of the ever-present dangers in the heart of the northern forest. Beyond the harrowing tales of hunters lost in the snow, fighting the insidious whispers of the wilderness, The ancient Algonquian legends delve even deeper into the chilling psychological landscape of this terrifying phenomenon, speaking not just of an external monster, but of a profound and deeply unsettling mental distress, a condition often referred in the lore as the Wendigo sickness. This is where the line between the supernatural entity and a very human form of madness blurs almost entirely, presenting a terrifying reflection of human vulnerability in the face of extreme hardship. The stories describe individuals, often those who have endured periods of intense privation and isolation, who begin to exhibit a series of increasingly disturbing symptoms, evolving from simple hunger into something far more sinister. They develop an unsettling, insatiable craving for human flesh, a hunger that is both physical and spiritual, and which no amount of normal sustenance can ever satisfy. This unnatural hunger, they say, becomes an all-consuming obsession, coloring every thought, every perception, every waking moment. Alongside this horrifying craving, the afflicted individuals often begin to behave erratically, displaying symptoms of extreme anxiety, profound depression, and a growing paranoia that isolates them from their community. They may become withdrawn, secretive, or conversely, agitated and aggressive, their once familiar demeanor twisting into something alien and frightening. Critically, the legend suggests that these individuals begin to see the world through the spirit's eyes, their perception skewed by the Wendigo's own ravenous perspective. They might perceive other humans not as kin or fellow beings, but as potential sources of sustenance, their minds warped by the very hunger they are fighting or, tragically, succumbing to. Indeed, this specific constellation of symptoms, the overwhelming craving, the erratic behavior, the paranoia, and the terrifying delusion of becoming a cannibalistic monster, has been recognized by early ethnographers and later by medical anthropologists as Wendigo psychosis, a unique, culturally bound syndrome that tragically arose in communities facing acute, life-threatening food scarcity during harsh northern winters. It is a powerful testament to how profoundly cultural beliefs can shape the experience of mental illness, particularly when those beliefs are rooted in the very stark, unforgiving realities of survival. The lore, therefore, acts not only as a warning against the dangers of the external wilderness, but as a profound exploration of the internal wilderness of the human mind, reminding us of the delicate balance between sanity and madness when our most primal needs override all other considerations, and the chilling truth that some monsters are born not in shadow, but in the deepest, coldest depths of human despair. So, as the last embers of our tale glow softly, casting long, dancing shadows across this warm tavern, it becomes profoundly clear that these ancient stories of the Wendigo are not merely simple narratives of fearsome monsters lurking in the desolate, snowbound corners of the northern woods. They are, in their deepest and most resonant essence, profound reflections of humanity's most arduous and existential struggles when confronted with the brutal, soul-crushing realities of extreme deprivation. These are tales born of a time when survival was a daily, often merciless battle against an unforgiving wilderness, and the very fabric of human endurance was stretched to its absolute agonizing limit. The terrifying spirit itself, with its gaunt form and insatiable icy hunger, represents far more than just a physical threat. It embodies the ultimate taboo, the most sacred and terrifying boundary within human society, the absolute, unthinkable act of cannibalism, a transgression so profound that it shatters not just one's connection to community, but to one's very soul. It is the fear of crossing that moral chasm, of being utterly transformed by a hunger so consuming that it obliterates all compassion, all empathy, all self-recognition. Moreover, the lore of the Wendigo speaks to the chilling, pervasive fear of an utter loss of self, a complete spiritual annihilation where the individual identity, nurtured by kinship and shared humanity, is consumed and replaced by a ravenous, monstrous emptiness. The narratives, handed down through generations by the Algonquian peoples, whose lives were so intimately bound to these harsh yet beautiful northern lands, serve as a timeless, urgent psychological warning. They speak to the fragility of the human mind under immense pressure, the insidious ways in which extreme hunger, isolation, and desperation can distort perception and unravel sanity, sometimes manifesting as a profound mental distress, a Wendigo sickness, where a person develops an unsettling, unnatural craving and behaves erratically, as if possessed by the spirit's own insatiable perspective. This is not just folklore. It is a cultural articulation of a real and terrifying psychological vulnerability, a deep wisdom about the true cost of survival when all other resources are exhausted. The Wendigo, then, stands as a haunting, ever-present metaphor for the beast that can awaken within us, a chilling echo of the choices we make when pushed beyond the boundaries of our own humanity in the profound, harsh winter of both the world and the mind. Ultimately, these deeply resonant tales of the Wendigo, whispered by the warmth of countless hearth fires over centuries, transcended mere chilling folklore. They served as profoundly powerful ethical frameworks, intricate moral compasses for communities whose very survival depended on their adherence to a delicate balance. More than just stories of shadowy monsters that haunted the frozen pines, these narratives were urgent, living reminders to the Algonquian peoples of the absolutely vital importance of sharing, of boundless cooperation, and of meticulously maintaining a deep, abiding, respectful balance with the formidable natural world that surrounded them, even and especially in the direst, most unforgiving times of scarcity and extreme hardship. They underscored the fundamental truth that in environments where resources could vanish overnight, where the harsh grip of winter could mean life or a swift, icy death, the very fabric of human society, its cohesion and its survival, depended utterly on these communal virtues. To take more than one's share, to hoard rather than to give, to neglect the needs of a struggling neighbor, or to disrespect the sacred gift of the land's bounty, these were not merely social transgressions. They were acts that, in the worldview of the old ones, could invite the insidious, transformative spirit of the Wendigo. The legends taught that the true strength of a community lay not in individual prowess or personal acquisition, but in the collective well-being, in the understanding that an individual's fate was inextricably linked to the fate of all. They were a constant, solemn admonition against the seductive pull of greed and selfishness, urging every person to remember their place within the intricate web of life, to honor the spirits of the land, and to never, ever cross the sacred boundary into a hunger that consumes not just sustenance, but humanity itself. Thus, the terrifying image of the Wendigo, gaunt and perpetually ravenous, became a stark, unforgettable symbol, a potent ethical touchstone that helped to define and reinforce the very boundaries of humanity, ensuring that even in the face of the most brutal wilderness, the warmth of communal spirit and the sacred laws of reciprocity would endure, a beacon against the encroaching, soul-chilling darkness of isolation, preserving not just bodies, but the very essence of what it meant to be human. As the last glowing embers in our tavern hearth begin their slow, gentle dance into ash, casting long, peaceful shadows around us, The ancient, chilling spirit of the Wendigo continues to hold its profound, unsettling power, not merely as a relic of forgotten times, but as a symbolic warning that resonates with timeless, urgent truth even in our modern age. Its gaunt, perpetually hungry form, an embodiment of the ice-bound wilderness, remains a stark reminder of the inherent dangers of unchecked excess, of taking more than one needs, of consuming without thought for replenishment, of an insatiable craving that, left unchecked, can devour not just resources, but the very soul of a community. The stories, whispered through generations by the resilient Algonquian peoples, speak not only to the physical perils of the northern forests, but also to the spiritual and ethical dangers of rampant individualism, of severing the sacred bonds that tie us to one another and to the earth that sustains us all. When humanity forgets its intrinsic connections to community, when the communal spirit of sharing and mutual support is overshadowed by self-serving ambition or isolating greed, the tales warn that the pathway to something monstrous opens wide. It is in those moments of profound disconnection, when empathy withers to the sacred web of relationships frays, that the true transformation begins. The potential for humanity itself to become something cold, something rapacious, something utterly devoid of warmth and compassion, reflecting the very essence of the Wendigo. This is not just a tale of a creature of myth, but a profound ethical mirror, reflecting our own choices and their far-reaching consequences. The Wendigo serves as an enduring guardian of the balance, a spectral teacher whose lessons are etched into the very landscape of these northern lands and into the collective memory of those who call them home. That true strength lies not in isolated power, but in shared responsibility, and that forgetting our place within the delicate, interconnected tapestry of life comes with an unspeakable, chilling cost. It is a cautionary narrative born of deep wisdom, reminding us that the greatest monsters often arise when we neglect the fundamental truths of our shared existence and the sacred trust we hold with both humanity and the natural world. Rest well, traveler. The next telling waits on Mondays at 4 p.m. EST and Fridays at 3 p.m. EST. Even in this rapidly changing world, where the hum of distant cities and the glow of electric lights sometimes seem to eclipse the ancient rhythms of nature, the chilling name of the Wendigo continues to evoke a profound, almost primal caution among those who remember the old ways. A gentle yet insistent reminder that the wilderness, both the sprawling physical expanse of snow-choked forests and the untamed landscapes within the human heart, still holds its deep, profound mysteries and presents challenges that demand nothing less than unwavering humility and steadfast respect. The lessons carried on the Biden wind, once vital for sheer physical survival in the face of brutal winters and scarce resources, remain surprisingly pertinent, speaking to universal truths about human nature, about greed, and about the delicate balance required for a truly harmonious existence. For the Algonquian peoples, whose ancestral lands are inextricably intertwined with these very narratives, the spirit's enduring presence is not merely a ghost story from a bygone era. It is a living, breathing symbol, a powerful ethical touchstone that urges vigilance against the seductive pull of excess, against the isolating lure of self-interest, and against the tragic forgetting of our profound interconnectedness. In our modern rush, where the drive for more often dominates, the gaunt, hungry image of the Wendigo stands as a stark, timeless counter-narrative, a quiet voice in the clamor, reminding us that true prosperity is not measured in accumulation, but in the health of our communities, the resilience of our spirit, and the respect we show for the finite bounty of the earth. It is a testament to the enduring power of folklore, how these ancient narratives, born of desperate times and profound wisdom, continue to offer guidance, shaping ethical frameworks that transcend generations and cultures, encouraging us to seek balance, to practice generosity, and to always, always remember that to disregard the warnings of the natural world or to succumb to the monstrous hunger within is to risk losing more than just our way. It is to risk losing the very essence of our humanity, becoming echoes of the hungry spirit itself, forever wandering in a landscape of self-made ice and profound, isolating emptiness, a chilling reminder whispered on every gust of cold wind through the pines. As the fire in our hearth settles into a gentle, contented glow, warming these ancient stones and our weary travelers alike, let us remember that these profound stories, these echoes of ancestral voices carried down through countless generations by the Algonquian peoples, were never truly meant to instill mere terror in the hearts of those who listened. Their purpose, the elders always taught, ran far deeper than simple fright, reaching into the very core of what it means to be human in a world that is both breathtakingly beautiful and brutally unforgiving. These narratives, woven with the threads of the Wendigo's chilling presence, were crafted not to frighten, but to guide. They were intricate frameworks for understanding the profound harshness of life in the northern forests, a harshness that could push even the strongest souls to the absolute brink of despair. They offered a vital, sacred map for navigating the perilous landscapes of scarcity, isolation, and the gnawing hunger that could, if left unchecked, consume more than just the body. More importantly, these tales served as a constant, urgent reminder of the paramount, life-sustaining importance of compassion, of empathy, and of the unwavering commitment to community. In a world where the cold could kill as surely as any predator, where resources were finite and easily exhausted, the strength of a people lay not in individual might, but in collective solidarity. In sharing the last morsel, in offering warmth to the shivering, in offering a helping hand to the faltering. The Wendigo, in this deeper understanding, was less a literal monster to be physically battled, but more a powerful, terrifying symbol against which the very best of human nature could be defined and tested. It represented the ultimate consequence of forgetting these sacred bonds, of allowing self-interest to override communal welfare, of succumbing to a hunger so profound that it consumed not just sustenance, but the very essence of one's humanity. Through these harrowing yet profoundly wise stories, ancestral voices continue to speak, urging us to remember the delicate balance between taking and giving, between individual need and collective well-being, between the human heart and the untamed wilderness. They are a timeless testament to the enduring power of respect, humility, and the unyielding warmth of compassion, even when faced with the deepest, coldest shadows of existence. Ensuring that the wisdom of the old ways and the vital lessons they impart continue to resonate long after the last embers have faded and the silence of the night has fully descended. And so, as the very last embers in our Moonlit Tavern hearth begin their slow, gentle descent into the quiet, contented ash, painting the ancient stone walls with the softest, most ephemeral dance of fading light, our journey through the chilling yet deeply wise tales of the northern forests draws to a close. I thank you, weary travelers, for gathering here, for lending your ears to these echoes from a time both distant and eternally present, for sharing this quiet moment around the comforting warmth of our fire. What has been told tonight is not just a collection of old stories, but a tapestry woven from the lived experiences and profound wisdom of the Algonquian peoples, a testament to their deep understanding of a world where humanity and wilderness are inextricably linked, where the line between the physical and the spiritual is often permeable, and where the human heart is tested by both the outer and inner winter. We have spoken of the Wendigo, a gaunt, hungry spirit, not to frighten you into a restless night, but to share what is known and what is understood about the perils of isolation, the insidious grip of greed, and the ultimate transforming power of a hunger that forgets its proper place. We have explored how such legends serve as ancient ethical compasses, guiding communities through times of dire scarcity, emphasizing the sacred importance of sharing, cooperation, and a profound, abiding respect for the delicate balance of the natural world. These are not merely tales of monsters in the snow-laden pines, but reflections of humanity's deepest struggles, its resilience, and its profound capacity for both light and shadow when pushed to the absolute brink. They ask us to consider the true cost of forgetting our connections to each other and to the earth that sustains us. So, as you prepare to venture back into the embrace of the night, or perhaps further along your travels, carry with you not the burden of fear, but the warmth of this shared telling and the quiet contemplation it offers. May your paths be clear, your hearts be full, and your spirit remain ever connected to the vibrant tapestry of life. Rest well, traveler. The next telling waits on Mondays at 4 p.m. EST and Fridays at 3 p.m. EST.